Okay, so today's daf yomi is Bava Basra, daf Kuf Mem Vav, Bava Basra 146. Today's daf is dedicated for Shmir for the Chayalim, Atzal for the Shuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. In this Eis Tzara, the daf yomi will start with the Mishnah on the top of 146a. It says the Mishnah, HaSholeach Sivlonos, the person sends Sivlonos, a chason sends Sivlonos Lebeis Chamav to his father-in-law's home. Rashbam tells us the minhag chasanim, it was the custom of the grooms after the betrothal the next day to send to their father-in-law's home to honor his wife. He would send jewelry and types of food and wine and oil, and sometimes he would eat there with them. So in this case, where he sends his sivlonos, shal sham mea maneh, let's say he sent him $100 worth of food, and then he ate a meal with them, afilu bidinar, even if it was just worth one dinar, eina nigbin, he doesn't get it back. In the case of where he dies or she dies, or let's say they change their mind, he doesn't get his money, those gifts back, because he waived his rights, because he ate there and he drank there, and because he was enjoying the food there, he waived the rights and he claims he would have, and so therefore he waived his claim to get it back. But Rashbam says this only refers to when he says he's waiving his rights based upon the Gemara, those gifts. There are two types of gifts. There are those that are asuyim levolos, and then there are inon asuyim levolos. Those that are going to be depleted, and those that are not going to be depleted. So those gifts that are going to be depleted, that's the ones that he waives his rights to. But the ones that are not going to be depleted, that he doesn't waive his rights to. And so therefore, we're also referring to another type of distinction that we're going to make in our Gemara. Rashbam says is just where he just sends the gifts without specifying. But if he sends the gifts with the intent they're supposed to come back with her to his home, then we're going to say hold on one second. The Rashbam writes, but Savona Stam, we're referring to these types of gifts that are Stam, that it doesn't specify. Because later on, we're going to distinguish between those gifts that he sent that Kadeshi Avoi Mala Base Bala, that they will come with her to when she goes to his house, and to those gifts, Sheshalach Kadeshi Tishtamas Beis Avia, the one that and those that he sent so that she should use them in their father's home. And those don't depend upon the achilas chasan. We call the bereisha that in the first place we're talking about stam sivwanus. The general distinction of the general sivwanus, hanotuyim besudas chasan. Those are the ones that depend on the chasan. So that's going to be another distinction that the Gemara is going to make. We'll see that in the Gemara. So back to the case of the Mishnah, if he didn't eat there, then he can collect the gifts back, or his heirs will collect them back. So that's what the Rashbam is referring to. Let's say he sent her a lot of gifts, and the intent clearly was that they will go back with her when she goes to his house. Those will be collected. And there it doesn't matter whether or not he ate with her. Sivlonos muatin, but if it was a small amount that shall be used in her father's home, then those are not collected. And where Rashbam explains, if it was a lot of sivlonos, meaning to say, it doesn't matter how much it was, it matters by the intent. And so, and if the intent was to go back, it just mentions Orcha de Milsa, that if the intent was to go back to her father's, to his home with him, then we're going to say those he gets to collect, even if he doesn't eat. Amarava Dafka dinar. So Rava says this is specifically if he ate a dinar's amount of a pachas dinar low, but if he ate less than a dinar, then we're going to say under those circumstances he's not waiving anything. So Gemara says Pshita dinar tanam. Well, that's what our Mishnah says. No, Ma'al the Tema, you might have said to Gemara, who aden dafilu pachos mi dinar. The same law even was less than a dinar. The Katani dinar, the only reason why I mentioned a dinar was Orcha de Milsa Katani. Just mentions typically that's the minimum that a person eats. Kamash Malan, so we learn from here, Achal Tanan. So Kamash Malan. So now the Gemara says, Achal Tanan. Okay, that's if he ate a dinar. Shasamai, let's say he just had a drink, he just had al chayim. Shasa Mayu. Who what will be the law of Shasa? Who Tanan? Excuse me. Achal Tanan, Shasa Mai. Who Tanan, Shluchel Mai. If he ate it, the Mishnah says that he waives it. What about if his agent ate it? Sham Tanan, let's say over there, if he ate in the Kala's home, that's where it talks about he waives his rights. Shagaro, but let's say it was sent to the Chasam, what would be the law of Ma'id? So Tashma, so the Gemara said, let's bring a proof. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ma'id about them. There was a story about one man, Shagaro Beis Chamav, that he sent to his father-in-law's home, Mea Koronos, Shalkada Yayin, Shalkada Shemen. He sent to his father-in-law's home 100 wagons of oil and wine, Mishalklei Kesef, Mishalklei Zav, and gold and silver, Mishalklei Milat, and fine wool, Verachav B'Simcha. So when he was riding there in his joy, V'halach v'amad al Pesach Beis Chamav, and he stood on the entrance to his father-in-law's home, V'otziu Kos Shel Chamim, and they brought him out to him a nice cup of coffee, a cup of hot drink, maybe tea, or actually, commentators say it was wine, Mishasa, and he drank it, Umeis, and he died after the fact. So they wanted to know if he waived his Sivlonos. So they brought it to the Sanhedrin, which was then in Usha. He said that those gifts that are supposed to be meant to be depleted, ain't in Nigbayin. That it doesn't collect. But the ones that are not going to be depleted, those the heirs can collect. Shema Mina, we learn from here, we learn a few things from this halacha. First of all, even though he didn't eat, but he just drank, then he waived his rights. But Shema Mina, even though he ate less than a dinar, he waived his rights to those assets that are going to be depleted. Vishma Mina. So Amar Vashi, no, that's not necessarily the case. How do we know it was worth less than a dinar? Maybe they used to take a pearl and crush it up and drink it. So maybe it was worth a lot of money. It was a fancy scotch. So how do we know that that's not what's going on? And Shmamina Afilu Shagrulo. We learn from here at least that they sent it to him, even though he wasn't there. He just sent it to him like an Uber Eats, and still he lost his rights. The Gemara says, no, Dilma Kol Pesach Beis Chamav Kebeis Chamav Dami. So we say, no, maybe the entrance of the house is like a father-in-law's house. But we also see from here that what would have he have lost? He would have only lost those assets that were supposed to be depleted. But the ones that were not meant to be depleted, those he could collect, even though he ate and drank with them. If he had indeed eaten and drunk. So the Gemara first asked this question, Mausha Yishalish. So the way commentaries explain this question is, let's say we're talking about a case where he didn't eat a dinar, but he ate a half a dinar. So then do we say that he waived his right to half of the sivlonos? So that's the question. What if Mausha Yishalish? Can we take a proportion? And also, Shevach Sivlonos Mahu. What about if the Sivlonos went up in value? They appreciated. So do we say what's the by there? Kivan di isnu with the day Hadre Bershuse Shavuach Odoma Kivan di Avde Imiganve. So the two sides to the question are, let's say, we're asking, the question is, where they return the Sivvanus, do they have to return the improvements in the Sivvanus? Let's say, says the Rashbam says says he sent sheep and cattle and they gave birth. So do you have to also return the offspring? Do we say, since if they have to give it back, they have to give it back to him? So therefore, since if they would still be in existence, they would have to return it back. So therefore, it's his improvement. Or do we say, since if it was stolen, they wouldn't have to pay it back. The woman wouldn't have to pay it back. If it was stolen, they would only have to pay him the sivlonos and not the shevach. So therefore, we say that it was in her domain that it improved. So the Gemara says, take it. We leave this question unresolved. By Rava asks the following question: Let's say he gave her those things that were supposed to be depleted. In which case, if he ate a dinar's worth, it's supposed to be waived. But these things did not get depleted. So now is he entitled to demand those back? Remember this case about the man who drank outside their house, and they said the ones that were supposed to be depleted, he doesn't collect, but the ones that were not supposed to be depleted, he does collect. My lab doesn't mean the ones that were supposed to be depleted, even though they didn't get depleted, he loses his rights. The Gemara says, no, Debo. No, we're talking about a case where they got depleted. Gemara didn't answer the question yet. Hold on one second. So then the Gemara says, as follows: Tashma, another attempt. Sivlonos muatin shetishtamish bahen. Let's say you have a small amount of sivlonos, and you gave it to her for her to use while she is in her father's home. Ein nigbin. You do not collect them. And this implies from the Mishnah that there's no distinction whether or not the sivlonos were depleted or not. But the main distinction is whether you gave them to be used in her father's home or not, or to bring them into her husband's home. So we learn from here that if you gave her sivlonos that were meant to be depleted, even though they didn't get depleted, it's as though they were depleted and doesn't collect them there. Gemara says, no, what's our Mishnah referring to? Tirgama Rava, Bava Basra. No, our Mishnah is talking about these little tchotchkes that they use for their hair. And so clearly there he's waiving his right for them whether or not they get depleted or not, because there's something so small they're not significant. And you can't answer the question of Rava by other assets which were meant to be depleted and were not actually depleted yet. So Gemara does not answer that question. So then we have another case, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Earlier we had Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now we have Rav Yehuda citing in the name of Rav. There was this incident where a person sent to his father-in-law's home. He sent him new wine, v'shemen chodesh, and new oil, v'kli plishtan chodesh, and a new piece of clothing. Bad Saris. He sent it on Shavuos. And the Gemara says, "Okay, very nice story, Micah Mashwan. Why are you telling us this story? What is the point?" Ibayasema. So some want to say Chashivusa Eretz Yisrael. Rav Yehuda was telling us the name of Rav, just how special the land of Israel is, that by Shavuos everything was new already. Ibayasema. The Italian Tana say Tana. No, it's telling us that, let's say he says, listen, I sent you these new things by Shavuos, and you might think that's insane. Of course you can't send it by Shavuos. No, it's a valid claim because these things happen in Israel. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and now we have a powerful story, a very important story. So there was a man that said his wife, they said that his wife was a tutranis. What's a tutranis? A tutranis is a woman who has lost her sense of smell. And so he wants to know if she has really lost the sense of smell. So he follows after her. She went into a chorba. She went into like a ruins. He wanted to check to see if she lost her sense of smell. Because if she indeed lost her sense of smell, that would be what's called a mumshe b'sefer, a hidden defect, and he would have been able to divorce her without giving her ksuba. So Amar Amarla, he says to her, Reach tzinon ani mariach begalil. He says, I'm testing her to see if she's smelling, if she can smell. So he says, he wants to see if she can check if she could smell the radish or not. He says, I smell a radish in the galley. And Rashbam gives two explanations. The first one is he had put a radish in his pocket and he wanted to see if she could smell it. Or alternatively, he says this because really there was a date with him. And he said it was a radish to see if she could say, no, it's not a radish, it's a date. And that would prove that she could smell. So that's what he said to her. And Amra, and she said, Amrle, man She says, what are you talking about? Give me a date from Jericho. So she answers in like a sarcastic manner or a joking manner. Machalna Bay. And she says, give us a date from Jericho and we'll eat it. Nafal Chorva, so this ruins fell upon her, and she died. Since he went in there just to check her, so since he went in there just to check her, so really he was intending to divorce her. If she didn't have a sense of smell, then if she died, he does not inherit her. So the Rashbam says, the kivan de hayabedaitu agarsha. So the Rashbam says, well, let's first go to the Tosfos. The Tosfos says, what kind of woman are we talking about here? What's their marriage? So he says, Tosfos says, Pirush Rabbeinu Yaakov. It could be the Rabbeinu Tam, but they usually call Rabbeinu Tam. So I'm not sure who this Rabbeinu Yaakov is. It's the Barusa Mairi. And she was just betrothed to him. And he wanted to see if she was really without her sense of smell or not. And if she didn't have her sense of smell, then if she had her sense of smell, he wouldn't marry her. And the Chum said, since he was going there to check her and not to marry, therefore, if she dies, he doesn't inherit her. So Tosfos says we're talking about a case where there's betrothed, but the Rashbam has a big problem with this. What's the big problem? Because generally speaking, the Gemara in Yevamos says that says you never anyways inherit a woman who is just betrothed. You only inherit her when she's fully married. And so therefore, Rashbam says we're obviously talking about a woman who's fully married. And since he had in mind to divorce her, Rashbam says, since he had in mind to divorce her, if she was blemished as a result of this, and she died before he was appeased, he does not inherit her. And so we see from here, says Rashbam, we see from here, if somebody's wife dies and they're in a fight, he doesn't inherit her. The Marashal extends this and says also, Rahman al-Islan, if they die, and they're in a fight, then he does not sit Shiva for her. That's what the Marshal claims, because how can he's not upset, because he's not mourning her. Anyway, that was that's sugya. So now he says, let's he sends her a small amount that she should use them in her father's home. Then under those circumstances, he does not collect it back because he clearly is waiving it. Yosef, Ravin, Saba, Kamed, Rav Papa, Yosef, Kamar. So Rav and Saba was sitting in front of Rav Papa, and he sat there and he said, Bein Shemei Sa'i, Bein Shemei Su. It doesn't matter. If she died or he died, Hadarhu, if he is the one who changes his mind, or excuse me, it doesn't matter if she dies or if he dies or he goes back. If he changes his mind, Savonas Hadri, then the gifts go back. But Machol Mishte, but the food and the drink lo hadar, then those don't go back, because generally speaking, we say you waive them because they were meant to be depleted. But Hadra Ba'i, but if she's the one who changed her mind, I feel Kisha Diyarka, then she has to return even like a bunch of vegetables. And Amar Chanina Brei Rav Yeshua v'Shaman may Basar Bazol. Okay, even though she has to return it, she doesn't pay the full price. She only pays because she went to bought the food otherwise. So Ad Kama Bazol, she pays a cheaper value. Ad Tilsa, she gets a third off, basically, because she went to had this big fancy meal. Says the Mishnah, Shlimera shekasav kol nechasav le'acherim. So a shlimera is a person who thinks they're going to die. So we're going to see that he had certain leniencies that if he gives away his assets, even without a formal kinyan, it's going to be a gift. But if he recovers, then the gift is canceled. But in this case, he writes all of his assets to others, v'shir karka kolshu, except he doesn't write all his assets. He leaves back a small piece of property. Now we're going to say that that's not the law of the shlimera, because shlimera is somebody who gives everything away. So there, because why would he hold it back? It must be that he thinks he's going to live. So therefore, it's a valid gift. Matan also kayemes. It's a valid gift, but that's assuming he did a kinyan. Lo shir karka kolshu. But if he didn't leave over anything, then we're not going to view it as a valid gift. Then it's a shlimera gift, and if he recovers, it's canceled. Ma'antana, so we assume that if he left over something, the assumption is that he didn't intend to give it as a shlimera gift, but as a regular gift. Ma'antana dazlina basar umdina. So we measure his mindset. So who's the source that says that we do what's called an umdina? We evaluate what do we think he had in mind. So says Rav Nachman, this is the position of Rav Shimon Manasseh. The Tanya, we actually had this just 2 weeks ago. This is the position of Rav Shimon Manasseh, which we had 2 weeks ago. A man, his son goes overseas. He hears his son died. And he says, I'm giving all my assets to this other person. And then a son comes home, matana, so matana. We say there that it's still a valid gift, even though he gave it all away, thinking his son was dead. But Rabbi Shimon Manasseh says, hey, matana, so matana. No, it's not a valid gift because he knew, because we evaluate, we do an umdana, we say, if we had known his son was alive, he wouldn't have given it. So therefore, in this case, it's not a valid gift. Rab Sheisha says it's not Rab Shimon Manasseh, it's Rab Shimon Shazuri. He's the one who says we Bava Basra umdina. Why? Because what's the case? At first they used to say, Hayotze Bekolar, a man is being taken out to be executed. Vamar Kisvu Gelish. He says, write a get for my wife, but he forgets to say, give the get to my wife. Then they said it's enough to, then we write it and we give it. But Chazir Omar, then they changed it. Even if the man's just going on the boat, he's going overseas. And Reb Shimon Shazuri says, Afam Mesukon, even the guy is just feels like his life is in danger, meaning to say he thinks he's about to die. And we assume that he meant to give the get to exempt his wife from Yibum. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, Omar from Rav Nachman, my time will mukum like Rabbi Shimon Shazuri. Rav Nachman, who says that it's like Rabbi Shimon Manasseh in the case of this son, where we say he intended to give the gift to his son, even though he gave to the other man. Why doesn't he take the case of Rabbi Shimon Shazuri with the case of the get? So he says, no, Shani Hasan, that case is different to Amar Kisvu. That case is more explicit because he literally said, write it. So therefore, it's not a case of an umdana. He's explicit. He says, write it. So clearly he meant to give it, because if he wasn't trying to divorce her, why would he say write a get as he's going out to be executed? For Rav Sheisha, my time will mukim like Rav Shimon Manasseh. Why does Rav Sheisha say that our Mishnah is like Rav Shimon Shazuri with the case of the get, and not the Rav Shimon Manasseh, who is the one who says umdana? So the Gemara says, because that's an umdana de mukach shani. Because that's a for certainty. That's a umdana that's very clear. Because as long as his son was alive, obviously he wouldn't given it until he never gave it until he heard his son died. But a case of a sick person, since most sick people live, and he didn't say give it, we're not going to assume that it's not as much of an umdana. So therefore, Rav Sheishis is therefore assuming it's that our mission is like Rav Shimon Shazuri, because the case of Rav Shimon Manasseh is so obvious. Who's the source of what the rabbis taught? And there was somebody who's sick and he's lying in his bed, and they said, who do you want your assets to go to? He says, I thought I had a son. Now that I have no son, I'm going to give my assets to this person. Or if he's sick and he's lying in his bed, and they said to him, I think my wife is pregnant. Now my wife is not pregnant, I give it to this person. And then afterwards, no, now afterwards you find out he really has a son, his wife really is pregnant. Matana. Then the gift to those other people are not a gift, it goes to his son. Who is this like? Isn't this exactly like the case of Rav Shimon Nasi? He says that he wants to give this gift he would have given it to his son if he knew he was alive. So below Rabbanan, you want to say this price is like Rav Shimon Nasi in that case, and not to Rabbanan. And the Gemara says, no, I feel with Tamer Rabbanan. You could even say this like to Rabbanan, who argue with Rav Shimon Nasi. Why? Because this case is different, because he says, Doma, he says, I wish I had a son. Doma, I thought I had a son, but now I don't. So he's explicit there. With the Ka'arile, so therefore this case is different. Even the Rabbanan would say it goes to the son and not to the person who gave it as a gift. So the Gemara says that's such an obvious question. What was even your Hava? I mean, what were you thinking from the beginning? With the Ka'arile, my Ka'arila? The Gemara says, and when you asked the question in the beginning, what were you asking? The Gemara says, he might have said, Ta'are would come midkar. He might have said he was just recalling his distress. That's all he was recalling on that day. Kamashma, no, he wasn't recalling his distress. It's teaching us, not that he was recalling his distress, but that he was that he was basically expressing his opinion that if he had a son, he would give it to his son. All right, we'll stop here. Shekayach to everyone. Shekayach.